Very interesting. So for our next speaker, actually is a group is Hélène from EFEO and Ashar, and also Dimas from Indonesian National Research Agency. So their presentation is another very interesting topic on depictions and dissimulation of birds in early Islamic Javanese art. So before the presentation, for our online participants, if you have any questions, please leave your questions in the Q&A chat box. And after the presentation by Hélène's and Ashar's teams, and we will have Q&A session, and then we will pick up some of your questions for our presenters, and then wait for the answer. So Alex and Ashar and Dimas, please. I'm going to.
The slides are not on the. Can you send me the actual PDF? Slides are on the
First of all, that both Ashar and I are very grateful to HKBU, and more particularly to Radu and Jiri for their invitation. Ashar is probably has another version that could be downloadable eventually. So again, thank you very much for your very kind invitation to fly us all the way from Indonesia. We hope we didn't kill any bird on the way here. So we had to answer this very short notice. On the other hand, this very short notice invitation by showing a very early stage of this research. So please bear with us, as we will have more questions than answers at this stage. So it will be a more descriptive and then analytical presentation, but of course we had to take this opportunity. You know, it's a great opportunity to get this paper matured with inputs from fellow art historians from Indonesia and related regions about bird symbolisms, religious and sociological and other meanings. Jiri was just mentioning domestication, farming. Of course, we are at a too early stage to know all this for the period that we're looking at. But hopefully, in the coming months, we'll have our paper matured in the contact with the contact with the other more advanced research from our colleagues. And also to mention in passing that early Islamic art is at a very early stage of research, and it's been generally quite neglected compared to the previous classical period, which Julie, Lydia Keevan, and other fellow historians are looking at. Oh, so this is okay. So, am I supposed to aim it here?
Yeah. The arrows, slides.
Yeah, we can just tell me maybe better. Next one, yeah. So the next slide, please. So I myself am an architecture historian from the École Française d'Extrême-Orient, EFEO, focusing on early colonial and early Islamic art and architecture. I've been now involved in a 3-year research program with the Indonesian National Research Agency, BRIN, an extraction from the previous Ministry of Education, Culture and Research. And BRIN assigned these 2 junior researchers to help with this research, Dimas, who is online with us, and Ashar, who has research experience in the Buddhist classical period iconography. So it's a real pleasure also to work with both of them. So we're now building an inventory of Islamic art in Java and neighboring island Madura that you can see in the top right corner from 15th, 16th, 17th century to identify possible schools or workshops and understand singularities of this art form of the early Islamic period. So just 2 days ago, Ashar and I just came back from Yogyakarta, where we completed the central Javanese segment of our inventory. You see the big name in bold, that's Yogyakarta. So bear with us if I don't make much sense. I'm a little bit tired from this long and intense field work. So next, please. One of the most striking features in the art of the early Islamic period in Java is the absence of human figures, right, and the efforts to dissimulate living creatures, mainly animal figures in this case. So this is what I've been documenting about one animal in particular, the feline, a mythical dog, lion, tiger figure in an article published in 2016. You can see that in my academia page, and that should actually soon be published in Chinese, mind you, by the Guangzhou Research in Fine Arts Bulletin. So another interesting aspect of the art from this period is the continuation of the use of pre-Islamic motifs such as kala, makara, the naga serpent, but also decorative motifs, mostly floral and geometrical for the reasons I just mentioned earlier. So this continuity is what my team and I have identified in not less than 20 recurring pre-Islamic motifs in the early Islamic period. However, maintaining these pre-Islamic motifs came with a cost, of course, and the cost is that their main features had to be dissimulated, as you can well see in the feline example here, where the heads especially had to be replaced by flames, floral whorls, or volutes, as is very clearly shown here in the felines from Sunan Derajat, Sunan Nur, and the fourth one is Derajat as well. So we'll see here that birds and related motifs, such as wings, is another enlightening study case that can help us better understand the variety of responses to this new orthopraxy. Next, please. So before we go deeper in Javanese funerary art of the early Islamic period, I'd like to have a quick overview to show that birds and wings are everywhere in Islamic art, and in Indonesia, all the way to this period, or very late, as Ashar will show in the examples below. So these are slight later examples, apart from the tomb of Malik al-Salim. They're probably from the 18th, 19th centuries. Ashar, you want to say a few words?
And the second is Gunungan, a central piece from the shadow puppet theater called Gunungan, open and close all representation, and is used as a scene changer. And the third, the frame wooden calligraphy representing the elephant bull from Cirebon, and the bird ababil from Quran, Surat Al-Baqarah, an adaptation of Al-Quran rich bestiary. And the palanquin in the shape of mythical crown bird from the Royal Cirebon collection, and two delupak or oil lamp from Sono Budaya Museum. That's very few are still in use.
Thank you, Ashar. So let's have next, please. So let's have a closer look at our first category, the figurative representations. Okay, so there remains very few sites in Java and Madura from the early Islamic period with intact iconography, with iconography at all, in fact. But those that have remained have quite a very well maintained art iconography. So there are only three main categories of sites that remain: funerary sites, royal collections from provincial cities usually, and national collections, which keep, in fact, the least items, national collections. So let's start with the funerary complex of Sunan Giri and Sunan Prapan from the late 16th and early 17th century. Next, please. So this is what usually those mausoleums look like. The tomb is in the core, so there is an inner square chamber surrounded by an outer chamber or corridor where pilgrims go to pray the holy man, the holy saint, and this is the facade of the outer chamber. Okay, so you can see the very intricate sculpted and painted panels, mostly representing floral motifs in geometrical panels. Next, please. This is a detail of one of the geographical panel. You see how intricate, but floral motifs are not random. They represent complex, in fact, quite complex gardens with lotus leaves and flowers in bloom or burgeoning, and quite a lot of things are happening there if you look very closely. And you have animating these scenes, tiny little birds hidden in flowers or leaves, and each panel usually have 2 or 4 birds, usually depicted symmetrically. But what we see that, they're clearly depicted in figuration compared to what you will see a little bit later. I wish we had another picture without the lines. Do we have that? Can you go back? Oh, in PDF, that's why, sorry. Aha. We had prepared a very sophisticated animation things where you would see the in our PowerPoint you would see the panels without the lines, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So here you see inside those lines figurative birds. Next, please. And Ashar will.
Here is another example of figurative birds, probably cranes, but here we see already some effort made to dissimulate them in the landscape. In the right, the crane is clearly visible, but left, the crane is depicted in a way that could be confused with a flower if you look from far.
Next, please. So this is what another mausoleum looks like. This is next to Sunan Giri. This is Sunan Prapen. So Sunan is let's say the title for holy man, yeah, or for a king or holy man, Sunan Prapen. Sunan Prapen is another Islamic political figure from the 16th, 17th century who is often, in fact, confused with his grandfather Sunan Giri. There's a lot of unknown information there, lacking information there about the historical figures they were. But anyway, these mausoleum can very clearly be dated to the 16th, early 17th century. And they're equally rich, ornate, but this one was painted with this distinct sharp green color. Not completely sure if it's very early or not. But anyhow, you can't see in this picture the facades because they're hidden by mosquito nets. Next, please. So here birds are clearly figurative, although the mythical winged animals, which they are standing on, are not. We'll go back to the animals later. Next, please. So here you see those birds quite clearly, and Ashar is going to show us other depictions in the garden landscapes.
The next please. Okay, that is undergraduate museum panels are also figurative, but with a clear attention to blend these figures in the landscape. Next. We cannot see anything from far, but a closer look shows small figurative birds blended in the landscape, hidden between a lotus leaf.
Thank you, Ashar. So let's now have a look at another site, a neighboring site. Next, please. Where? Oh, okay. So the red square should be to the right. We shifted during the shift from PowerPoint to PDF. So we'll have a look at this site that Ashar pointed, Sendang, where birds were carved with even more intention to dissimulating their features. Next. So this is an iconic site of the early Islamic period. It's built in terraces, as you can see in the plan to the right, on top of a hill in terraces, which is a pre-Islamic, but also a pre-Indic feature. This is the gate F that you can see in the plan. Next, please. So not much is known about the holy man buried on this site, but it's very probably from the 16th, early 17th century. It's one of the richest artistically ornated site artistically. So there are two gates with very probably peacocks, but the difficulty is that they are in fact represented in abstraction. So this is gate F and E. In the gate F here, you see the lintel with two peacocks facing each other, probably peacocks. They're entirely represented in volutes, so curls and spirals. So maybe we can discuss later if any one of you have a better interpretation for these birds. Gate, next please. So the gate E is also most famous for its wing gate. This used to bear wings. You have to imagine big, large wings to the left and right. But this one lost its wing to an earthquake in the 19th century, another in the early 20th century, sadly. Next, please. And to the the foot of this gate, to the left and right, you would see, either peacocks with their open tails, or maybe another bird. The head and neck is very clearly visible, but the feathers and chest could be, anything in volutes. I mean, this is to show the very intricate work in abstraction. Next, please. Another very important site is Mantinan. So Mantinan plays a very important role in the early Islamic art, as it has more than, I think, probably about 50-ish, if not more, panels carved like this one, entirely in abstraction. So you see animals represented in, using stems of lotus leaves and flowers. This one represents a bird. A good game would be for me to try to find it, because it's probably one of the most intricate, one of the most abstract ones. And Ashar is delineating for you. This is the head. The head is there. The wings. Yes. So maybe a geese or similar animal. Mantingan is the site of the tomb of Ratu Kalinyamat, the Queen Kalinyamat, who fought the Portuguese in the early 16th century in Malacca. It's, as you can see, highly ornate panels in stone with animals in abstraction, and the birds play an important role here, like this goose here, maybe a goose. So next, please. Mantingan is also famous for roundel, so they are panels in lozenge or hexagonal panels, but it's also very famous for its roundel panels that are very, that very clearly can be assimilated to earlier Panataran roundels. So Hindu Buddhist period, late Hindu Buddhist period temple. But as you can see in Panataran, they are clearly figurative, whereas in Mantingan, the yellow ones, you can see the abstraction intention at work already. And with some of them being so highly abstract that they can hardly be visible. The one to the lower left corner, it should be the circle to the right should be a little bit longer because it seemed to maybe represent a phoenix with this very long floating tail. Yeah, to that side there. So the left could be a bird of paradise, a phoenix in foliages with a similar long floating tail. To the right could be a parrot that Julie has mentioned that played a very important role in volutes. Below would be another parrot, maybe. Sorry, to the upper left and right should be parrots. But they were placed at a very high position in the mausolea. So, and apparently it's a bit of a misplace due to maybe miscalculation during the restoration. But the parrot should probably not be lying like this, but more vertical. Next, please. We have another 5 minutes. Yeah. So last, we'd like to end with the wing motif. So the wing motif is a very interesting one, and I will end with this example, which is still a little bit under study, to show that the wing motif is quite complex, and it's not exclusively dedicated to the aviary species, but to very probably, and this is our hypothesis right now, to celestial beings in general and celestial context. Here are 2 examples of winged gates, one to the funerary site of Sunangur, the one that still exists now, and the other to the pleasure garden of the 18th century Yogyakarta palace, the Taman Sari, which was built in the mid 18th century. So wings were not only for gates or relegated to birds. Next, please. As you can see in this mythical beast carriage from the 18th century Cirebon collection, so West Java Royal Collection, this mythical beast also wear these amazing wings. This is the Singabaro, or the battle lion, with an elephant tusk and fangs, a bull body, kala head, robodging eyes, and golden feather wings. So I don't have time to go further deep into this example, but next, please. This is just to show you that wings were not exclusively attributed to birds or aviary. Left is another example of the use of wings for a mythical animal. This is another animal that I've studied in the 2018 article. a non-aviary animal with wings. This is a standing feline figure guarding the tomb of Sunan Sendang. And I don't know if you see the wings. Can I have the pointer? Okay, so you see here the face with bulging eyes and the horns. Yeah, the horns here. So here's the face. Here's the body. This is the forearms. It's sitting, and then you see the wings here, and then with the fluffy tail that is very typical from this period. Thank you. So last, Ashar will. This is a very funny and insightful example that Ashar has found also for the use of representation of wings in in non-Islamic representation. But still, it's a Javanese gunungan, so Ashar will say a few words about it.
Okay, thank you, Hélène. That is gunungan. The gunungan from Wayang Wahyu, created in 1960. From at the top, there is a picture of a red and white flame. Below, it is a hand holding up 2 fingers down. Then on either side are grapevines and their fruit. Next, there is dove that is developing wings, under which there is image of Jesus, and 10 Roman numeral in this place. A church that is the shape of Saint Peter Church is depicted underneath flame by 2 angels, cow and 2 birds. In front of the church there are 7 shower and pool with the 2 deer to the left and right drinking water from the pool. Then there is a ladder in front of the pool. Earlier has 3 steps. Underneath there is a picture of a kind of flame. So the wings is all for angels and the dove. I think it's.
Thank you. So just to conclude and summarize a little bit, whether hidden between leaves or represented in abstraction, birds seem to have an omniscient presence in the funerary iconography of the early Islamic period. They're the only living creatures to have escaped, seemingly in some cases, the ban or systematic abstraction of features. When represented in abstraction, craftsmen tend to show the variety of species, unlike mythical animals, which tend to be more uniform. So we saw parrots, geese, peacocks. They seem to have enjoyed special treatment, and we're looking forward to working with specialists of old Javanese literature and religion, but also of other regions, to learn about their symbolisms. As Jerry already mentioned, parrots play an important role, for example, in old Javanese romances as carriers of love messages, yeah, if I'm not wrong. And last, wings are non-exclusive of bird representation, as can be seen in depiction of winged felines or other mythical animals. They more suggest celestial or spiritual identity of these entities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation and so many good examples to demonstrate about the birds. Yeah, I would like to check any online questions. Okay. Not yet. Okay. So actually, I have 2 questions for our second presenters. The first questions is about when you present peacocks and also phoenix in your presentation, is most of them are related to the Islamic art. But I wonder, is there any inheritance from Hinduism, for example, like Garuda, because they also have wings, and do they have any decoration linked up with the early Islamic arts? This is my first question, because you always, especially Adam, you always mention the abstractions about it. It's about the cause-relation linkage between the representation of birds and also like Garuda, because maybe they have some linkage on that, especially for the wings decoration. And second is about the coarse material craftsmanship, because in your whole presentation, you use many different types of materials like wood, stone-based relief, terracottas, maybe have bricks, and also wayang. So how can they present or represent or visualize the birds from different kinds of material, in particular on the craftsmanship? Because in my research in Angkor, we also have these problems on talking about the coarse material craftsmanship on the visualization of the material. In particular, the birds, when Ashar mentioned about that on the wayang, it obviously the feather and also on the wings is more clear than on the stone-based relief, or even for the wood. So I'm quite curious about this. Can you give us some? Well, the cross material craftsmanship, do you have any observation on their representation, the difference or similarities? Because you always mention about rings. What about the head's feather presentation? Because on the stone is more rough and more abstract, compared with wayang.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Or even Julie, if you have any ideas about it.
Right. I'll just answer the first one maybe about representations of Hindu. Well, they were, most of them were Hindu from Hindu iconography. We didn't, because they're birds here. I mean, you rightly mentioned Garuda. We didn't mention it on purpose because that's actually a big section of our of this research. But we're still beginning this. We've identified a good part of the iconography on the Garuda already, but we didn't want to include it here because it's still very, there's still a lot of questions about it. And the different representations, it's so varied that it would have needed a whole other presentation. But as Ashar was mentioning to me the other day, that for example, if you go back to the oil lamp example, the second slide, if I'm not wrong. The second slide is a very interesting example that Vishnu in Indian mythology is also associated to Surya, and this is Giri, about our furniture research. This could add to it. This is an oil lamp, and strangely, sorry, the fourth slide.
So, next.
Did you want to say something about that? So we're still looking into it, but it's interesting to see, could there be a symbolism that these oil lamps that are still in use, in fact, in some places, very few places, but mostly religious places, interestingly, like in Sunan Gunung Jati, they still have one of these oil lamps standing there and still in use. Could it be a representation of Surya as well?
If I may add one more point. You asked about the material, right? And we see also these wing lamps in metal. Then it's obvious that it's that the function, it has a function actually. It functions like a reflector. Because if you imagine the light conditions of pre-modern Java, where the night is the most pleasant part of the day, right? You have 12 hours darkness basically, so you need artificial light. And they used oil lamps. Oil lamps basically give very, very little light unless you use a kind of reflector. And these wings, as you spread them, you can close them. Actually, they are foldable. You can close them or spread them. Exactly. And you can even orient the light using these wings. So they are perfectly practical objects, actually. And in my view, they were, for that purpose, they will be produced in metal, right? Which makes perfect sense because metal is like mirror. It's more, the reflective surface is much better than wood. But the relations with Surya is obviously interesting because it's the sun of the night in that case. Surya is the god of sun, right? And sunlight and day, basically. And then if you have wings, if you can connect it somehow with Garuda and with Surya, then you are to the interesting conclusion that you have prolonged day by the presence of the divinity on your lamp. And by the way, there are also oil lamps in the form of the owl. And that's also quite interesting because the owl is exactly the animal that marks the night. So it's perfect animal for the decorator. Decorate is probably not the best word. In this pre-modern world that's so far from our mentality and even, of course, from modern Indonesian mentality, it's really far away today. All was divinized in a way. So basically, even the lamp was a kind of, aspect of the divinity at that time, which is still in Bayang, if I am not mistaken. So basically, I will only add that we must really try to understand more how relates the function of these objects to the symbolism of wings or birds or winged creatures, which should be actually more in this pre-modern mentality than just decoration. To me, this is perfect case, these oil lamps, because it has perfect technical function and it works well, it's symbolical at the same time. Well, maybe it answers a little bit of your part of your question.
I think about figure, the Garuda figure. This level, but this is still discussion about it. The figure is, some people said that is Garuda. Why Garuda is depicted in the oil lamp? I mentioned George William said that Garuda has a relation to the sun because Garuda is sometimes called the sun god. Also, Garuda is the great sun eagle. So, why the Garuda is figure in it because there is a relation with fire and fire gives with the light.
Yeah, we just want to be very careful with Garuda because we're talking about a very early period, and sources for this period are extremely rare. We'd have to look into early text, and this is why we're very much dependent on scholars like Giri and Andrea and Arthur Griffith and all these experts on Javanese text and religion, because it's, but definitely interviewing people, practitioners of this furniture, of this art today is also very interesting, and they all talk about Garuda, but what was it exactly then? This is what we're missing a little bit. Do you want to add something, or should I answer Fatma?
I would like to pose a question rather than to add something more. I mean, what is, in my view, as a non-specialist on Islamic art, what is most interesting is the fact, is just the finding what types of birds appeared with the Islamization, what types of birds representations, because we have so many in pre-Islamic Hindu, Buddhist, Javanese art, or Indonesian, or Southeast Asian art generally. We have so many depictions of birds. If we just stick the depictions on stone and terracotta temple reliefs, we clearly must divide between narrative birds in narrative scenes, where it's more easier actually to understand why they are there, and between much more difficult, these medallion-like birds, which is actually an enigma so far in my view, why they are there actually in such high numbers compared to other animals depicted in these medallions. And that would be interesting to see what exactly appeared that's novel. Obviously, it's this beautiful abstractization, which is wonderful And it actually has its roots already in Hindu Javanese art, where we see later phase of Hindu of Majapahit art, we see general tendency to a kind of abstractization and a riddle of playing the riddles by making depictions of animals difficult to distinguish from flowering background. It's common with elephants and with other animals and with birds as well. That's one aspect that's obviously that's been increased with the process of Islamization. It actually didn't start with Islamization. It was just increased. But another aspect, and Hélène actually did some research on the second aspect, is what is novel? What are novel representations that either build on Hindu Javanese previous iconography or are completely novel?
Can I answer? Sure. Yeah, about this, the abstraction and whether it's a new thing or not in the early Islamic period. This is why I'd rather talk about autopraxy and a new the good practice rather than a ban on figuration, right? It's a new trend which was already abstraction, as you mentioned, it was already there. James Bennett has already mentioned that also. But suddenly it's everywhere, right? But it wasn't invented during the early Islamic period. It's not a new thing, but it suddenly spreads to other sites, right? And that's why I rather use autopraxy than ban iconoclasm or anything else. What was novel? I think we can answer that question in the article if, inshallah, this, we manage to write something, because I think we have enough to answer that question. Also, because seemingly from what we saw so far, there's a lesser collection of birds compared to the classical period. It seems also because we like the narratives. We have representation of animals, but we don't have narratives anymore, which you have in the classical period. So that already takes a big chunk, a big section, a big number of birds away, and we're left with just depictions of birds in abstraction, most of them, and their symbols, etc. But yeah, we don't have the context anymore. So it's going to be quite a big work on interpreting thanks to the previous classical period narratives. And just to finish, can I answer about craftsmanship? If I understood your question well, you were wondering whether there were differences in difficulty between one material to the other. It's a very interesting question, because what we're art historians are trying to answer for this so-called transition period, we're still transitioning actually, because Indonesia is still, Islamized, and it's still going on. So this, let's call it early Islamic period. What is interesting is to see the differences in craftsmanship, right? But between the classical period and the so-called early Islamic period. What is really interesting is to see the continuity, not just in the use of motifs, as we just saw, but also in the use of material and the how do you call it, the facture, right? The way the different stylization, okay? And there are a lot of similarities as well, which tends to show that craftsmen from the Majapahit period, the so-called Majapahit period, from that 15th, 16th century period were really transmitted very clearly their knowledge, their stylization from one material to the other, whether it's stone, terracotta. So you can still see all this in the Pasisir, so in the northern coast, in the so-called Islamic period. can see really a very clear transition. I mean, very clear inheritance of all that, and whether. And this explains also the very rich and intricate and sophistication. It didn't happen just like this. They were the same craftsmen. And what I mean, this is a shortcut, but this is what we're trying to show, that there is clear continuation between the workshops in the Hindu Buddhist period to the early Islamic period. Sure, clear. I mean, if you look at Penata, compare Penata and Mantingan, yes, it's more intricate because
It's very similar.
but it's very similar. They learn, they go to those sites and they continue the learning and the teaching. Yeah.
Thank you, Hélène. Yeah. So maybe we can continue our discussions during our lunch. So.